the door? Are we gonna wait a few minutes?
Yeah, I'll get it.
Okay, let's see. We'll call on Stephen to do the prayer tonight to get us started.
Well, all right.
Would you please? Oh, yes, answer your phone.
By the way, there's decaf.
Lovely.
Let's pray. Father in heaven, we're thankful for this day, and we're thankful for your many blessings and your continued watching care over us, Father. We pray that you'll help us this evening as we think about the things in our life and how we organize our life and how we can be best of service to those around us and to your cause. Father, pray that you'll watch over and lead us. In Jesus' name, amen.
Thank you. Well, thanks for coming again, you guys. I didn't scare you off too bad yesterday. If you missed yesterday, I put the handouts back on the back and some extra handouts for tonight are back there too. I think I got everybody who wasn't here last night already, but if you want more, take more. So last night we talked about the topic of balance, what it is, how we get out of balance, and what we can do to restore balance. And then tonight we're talking about boundaries, how to have boundaries, not just with other people, but with yourself. And so I'm going to start off asking you how many of you played Red Rover as a kid? Did everybody in here play it?
Why, yes.
Last night nobody played the last straw camel game. So not you guys know Red Rover, where you divide them into two teams and you hold hands and you say, Red Rover, let Rebecca Owen come over. And then she runs as fast as she can and as hard as she can and tries to break through what she thinks is the weakest link of the held hands. And if she gets through, if she breaks through, she gets to take one of the people on that team who she thinks would have a strong arm back with her to the other team, on her team. And if they hold and she doesn't make it through, she has to join that team. And the winner is the team who finally ends up with everybody. So eventually there's two people standing there with their hands. And so they don't play it anymore because sometimes arms break and so
Minor problems.
Fun, you know? You're not having fun unless somebody's bleeding or something's broken.
That's right. That's the way I
It's our family
We're
rule.
way too far away from the heart.
It has to be dangerous to be fun.
So you guys already kind of read ahead a little bit on your handout with those 10 questions. So you can keep your answers to yourself if you want, but I'm just going to read through them and think to yourself whether you would say yes or no. So how often do you say yes when you should say no? Frequently say no when you really want to say yes. Pretend to agree when you really don't. Keep your true feelings hidden.
Wait, can you back? You just said you say no when you really should say yes. Is that
I
what you?
said that.
So that's number one.
No.
Oh. Okay, that's
Wait a
okay.
minute, Dave. The slow
Okay, I got
sit
you.
over there.
You're reading. I got it.
Put them in the corner.
Okay, I got
Does that
it.
make sense? No. One of
You're
them is you
reading
say
fast,
yes.
faster than I can read.
One of them is you say yes when you want to say no. You agree, I'll do that. The second one is you say no, but you really want to say yes. You're just like, oh no, I don't need to do that. Okay? Okay. 3, pretend to agree when you don't. Number 4, keep your true feelings hidden. Number 5, work too hard or too long too often.
Failed that one.
Number 6, keep your comments to yourself. Number 6, routinely do too much for other people. Number 7, not rest when you are tired.
Failed that
Number
one.
8, not stop to eat regular healthy meals.
Failed that one.
Number 9, not get enough sleep.
Failed that one.
And number 10, feel resentful of all the demands placed on you. Yeah, well, if you said yes to even one of those, you're in the right place tonight. Let me start with a little story. Robert Murray McShane was a 19th century preacher who graduated from Edinburgh University at the age of 14. Smart guy. When he was only 23, he led a Presbyterian congregation that had over 1,000 members. And McShane couldn't seem to say no to anybody, himself or anybody else, when they asked him to do something. He was very driven and worked very hard. But he worked hard, year after year after year, and finally his health broke. So before he died at the ripe old age of 29, he wrote this. He said, God gave me a message to deliver and a horse to ride. But alas, I've killed the horse and now I can't deliver the message. So McShane had no real boundaries and he pretty much worked himself to death. So something to think about. So what are boundaries? Well, basically a boundary is anything that separates one thing from another thing. That's a pretty simple definition. Some boundaries are really obvious and other boundaries are not so obvious. So take a look around you, and there's lots of boundaries just in this room. First of all, there's a door. That's a boundary between in here and the hallway. This building is a boundary separating us from outside. The chair you're sitting on is a boundary between you and the floor. There's lots of boundaries. There's dividing lines on the freeway. There's curbs on sidewalks, fences between yards, borders between countries and between states. And the uses of these boundaries are all very similar. It's to keep out what you don't want and to keep in what you do want. So those are all physical boundaries we just talked about. But there's also personal boundaries, and they're pretty much the same. They keep us safe, and they define what's me and what's not me. That's where boundary is. So we obviously don't surround our bodies with physical barriers like chain link fences or concrete curbs or border patrol booths that prevent people from coming too close. At least most of us don't do those things. But most personal boundaries are not physical at all. So there's a little graph on your handout called proxemics, and all that is a fancy word that says how far is the distance between two people. And we have different comfort levels. For example, let's say you're standing in line at the grocery store to check out, and somebody comes that you don't know and stands behind you, but like really close. That makes you uncomfortable, right? You're like, ugh. So you might step to the side, right? Because they just got too close. They're out of our comfort zone. That's a boundary. But if you'll notice, other cultures don't have those same boundaries. So maybe that person behind you was of Asian descent. They have different boundaries. In China, they have different boundaries. They stand close, and when they get in line to do something, their rules are very different too. So, yeah, we're uncomfortable in America when somebody stands too close, especially if we don't know them. So, boundaries are the fundamental things that keep you safe and support your well-being. There's a lot of practical boundaries we learn as kids, like keep your hands to yourself, don't touch things that aren't yours, don't talk to strangers, stop interrupting, all boundaries. So let's talk about what some boundaries are. Some boundaries that we have, all of us have these boundaries. So how many of you have watched a little baby, an infant, learn that that hand is theirs? Yeah. They're like, ooh. And then, they're flailing or whatever because they don't have control yet. And then all of a sudden it's like, oh, so it's fascinating, but that's the first boundary you learn about is your skin. That separates me, what's not me. And they have to learn what that is. And our skin, if you think about it, has openings that let good things in, like air and food, and lets bad stuff out, like sweat, germs when you sneeze, waste products. That infant discovering the hand, doing a lot of waste product output. So another boundary that we all have are our words. Again, thinking of a toddler, no is the most basic boundary setting word that we have, and they learn that word very early. They love to use it. So the Bible is very big on this. It talks about let your yes be yes and your no be no in Matthew 5:37. Words define our emotional property for other people, our feelings, our intentions, what we like, what we don't like. Another boundary is privacy, like a closed bathroom door. That's a boundary. And a phone booth, back when we had those were boundaries. Some of you probably don't know what a phone booth is, but it was a boundary.
Poor Superman.
So boundaries also define our personal property. Some stuff belongs to me, some stuff belongs to you. Toddlers don't go by those same rules. And so you probably heard this before, but I love it. Toddlers' rules of ownership. If it's mine, it's mine. If it's yours, it's mine. If I like it, it's mine. If I can take it away from you, it's mine. If I'm playing with something, all of the pieces are mine. If I think it's mine, it's mine. If I saw it first, it's mine. If I had it but then put it down, it's still mine. If you had it and then you put it down, well, now it's mine. If it looks like the one I have at home, it's mine. If it's broken, it's yours. So personal property is a type of boundary. Another boundary is geographical distance. Physically removing yourself from a situation will help maintain the boundaries. And sometimes the only thing you can do to protect yourself is put distance between you and whatever the danger is. So even adults need time out sometimes. Like, let's just say you've got a very active kid and that kid's just getting on your last nerve that day, and you think if he does that one more time, there's only going to be one of us here anymore. And so you might have to take a time out and distance yourself, go to your room and say, Mommy's taking a time out because I'm just out of control, or whatever. That's a geographical distance boundary. In an abusive relationship, sometimes the only thing you can do is put a geographical distance boundary to protect everyone. And then there's also emotional distance, not as obvious, but very strong. So sometimes we choose not to reveal the deepest parts of our character, those innermost parts of ourselves, either because we don't quite trust that other person to that level, or sometimes because we've been hurt in the past and we're so afraid of being hurt again that we've got those walls up. And sometimes it's wise, sometimes it's not, but emotional distance is another boundary. And then time, you might not think of time as a boundary, but it is. You ever wait in line for a movie on opening night? And I didn't let you in before the popcorn's clean. Have you ever waited to board an airplane? You can't just go on whenever you feel like it. Or wait for the next season of Downton Abbey. That takes like 8 months. Put a kid in timeout for 15 minutes. That's a time boundary. Or when your kids are little, you know how they love to get up really, really early on Saturday morning, and that's the only day that you get to sleep in? Well, you might say, okay, honey, you have to wait until the big hand's on the 12 and the little hand's on the 7 before you can come into Mommy and Daddy's room. That's a time boundary that they're learning at a little young age. So they might not respect it, but you can try. So those were different types of boundaries we have, but we also get confused and think that a boundary is something it's not. So let's talk about what it's not. A boundary is not a wall. A wall is solid, impermeable, and it's there for isolating and cutting us off from someone or something. A boundary, instead of a wall, has to be permeable so that you can let the good stuff in and the bad stuff out. You choose what comes in and out, but it's permeable. Number 2, setting a boundary is not an attempt to control or manipulate another person, although it can seem like it is, especially to the other person, okay, because you're saying no to something. Boundaries, number 3, don't mean saying no all the time. We like to live in a black and white world where it's either this or it's that. And a healthy place to be is where sometimes you say yes and sometimes you say no. So boundary doesn't mean you say no all the time. It's not healthy to say yes every time someone wants you to do something, but it's neither loving nor healthy to say no all the time either. So let's talk about boundaries for a minute from a Christian perspective. A lot of times we feel guilty about setting boundaries because it feels like it's selfish. It feels like we shouldn't do that, and we think, well, you know, a lot of Jesus' teaching involved putting others first and being unselfish and putting their needs ahead of ours. But if you take a look at it, boundaries are a very biblical concept. First of all, the concept of boundaries comes from the very nature of God himself. He defines himself as a distinct, separate being. He is not us, we are not him, and he's responsible for himself. He defines and takes responsibility for his own personality by telling us what he thinks, what he feels, what he allows, and what he doesn't allow. And for example, in 1 John 4:6, we read that God is love. He's saying, this is what I am. That's a boundary. In 1 John 1:5, we're told that God is light. There's no darkness there. There's a boundary. I am light. I am not darkness. God limits what he'll allow in his presence. That's a boundary. If we choose to violate those limits, if we sin, then there's consequences, just like with earthly boundaries. There's lots of examples of Jesus setting boundaries. You'll notice that he healed some of the people that came to him, but not all of them. He knew that he had to leave the crowds and get some rest, or he would leave the crowds and go talk to his Father. He was showing us how to set boundaries and how to prioritize. Listen to what he told his disciples in Matthew chapter 10, verse 14. He says, if any household or town refuses to welcome you or listen to your message, shake its dust from your feet as you leave. Boundary. They're not accepting what you're saying. Go find people who will. So that was a boundary he wanted them to set. And we've got lots of boundaries about how we should act around other Christians. The qualifications for elders are boundaries. You meet these, you get to go through that. If you don't, you don't. Baptism is a huge boundary. Those who believe and are baptized are saved. The command to be in the world but not of the world. Those are all boundaries. So a lot of folks, even knowing all that, we still have trouble with the feeling of setting a boundary because we feel like we're being selfish. We have trouble deciding, is this okay to do, or am I going too far and saying no? And verses like, I love Philippians, but there's the verse Philippians chapter 2, verse 3 that kind of confuses us. And it says, do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit. Rather, in humility, value others above yourselves. Okay, so if I set a boundary, it seems like I'm putting my needs ahead of the other person. If they ask me for help, shouldn't I just help them, no matter what? And so listen to this. I'm going to talk about what's in Galatians 6, starting in verse 2 through verse 5 for a bit, and it'll kind of help us understand this. So first, let me read that. Galatians 6, verses 2 through 5, and it's on your handout there if you don't want to turn to it. It says, carry each other's burdens, and in this way you will fulfill the law of Christ. If anyone thinks he's something when he's nothing, he deceives himself. Everyone should test his own actions. Then he can take pride in himself without comparing himself to anybody else. For each one should carry his own load. Okay, so in that passage it says both carry each other's burdens and carry your own load, right? It seems to contradict itself. So let's look at the word load there in verse 5. In verse 5, Paul states that each one should carry his own load. And the original meaning for that word that was translated load, I was reading, means knapsack. That's a lightweight thing that you carry with you. It's like your daily stuff you got to do. I'm carrying my knapsack. Carry your own knapsack. Take care of your stuff. Basically, we're supposed to all carry one of those, and the other person is supposed to carry their one of those. And then if you look back at verse 2, where he says carry each other's burdens, I understand that that word means boulder, like a crushing heavy weight that you can't carry by yourself. And so we're supposed to help each other with those heavy, crushing burdens that we can't alone carry. So a person with healthy boundaries, looking at those verses, takes responsibility for his own life and allows others to live theirs. The goal of boundaries is to make sacrifices for other people when it's appropriate, but never in a destructive way. Sometimes we do stuff for other people and it's not a loving thing to do because all it's doing is enabling them to be lazy or slothful or whatever. And sometimes you don't know. I mean, you kind of have to use your judgment and ask God's help in figuring those things out. But that verse helped me, or those verses helped me kind of make the differentiation between what's a load and what's a burden and how we can know. Think about the story of the Good Samaritan over in Luke 10, starting in verse 30. And that illustrates the same thing. The Samaritan stopped to help, and he put the guy up, in a hotel of the time, but he didn't put him up in there for the rest of his life. It was basically understood that when he was well enough, he could go on his way. He didn't take care of him forever when he could take care of himself again. So I think we're always, if you're a conscientious person, I think you'll always struggle a little bit with, should I say no to this or should I say yes? Because I think it's good to help people, and sometimes, a lot of times, we do need to put that ahead of what our own needs are. So, but anyway, just a little blurb that maybe will help you there. Let's talk a little bit about boundaries you have that you're responsible for. What things am I responsible for when I'm dealing with other people? And the first thing is you're responsible for your feelings. Nobody can make you feel any certain way. Now, their actions can influence how you feel, but it's pretty much your own thoughts and your own choices that determine how you feel in the long run. Do you remember that picture we had yesterday, the little stick figure? Something happens, you have a feeling, you have a thought, then you do something, and you can change that part about what I think about it, which in turn changes your feeling and moves you in a better direction. So, you're also responsible for your own attitudes and beliefs. There's a difference between the two. Your attitude has to do with how you think about something, the stance you take towards other people, God, life, work, relationships. So for example, in general, I may think that work is necessary and usually a pretty good thing, but also some days it's a pain. That's my attitude about work. Beliefs are things that you hold to be true. Like I believe the earth is round. I believe Jesus is the Son of God. So we have attitudes and we have beliefs, and you're responsible for yours. We also are responsible for our own behavior, actions, and choices. This is the whole idea. This is the whole idea of reaping and sowing. In Galatians 6:7, it says, a man reaps what he sows. That means you do something, there's a cause and effect. There's going to be a consequence, either good or bad. So examples, if I work, hopefully I'll earn a paycheck. If I'm kind to other people, there's a good chance they'll be kind back to me. Those are natural consequences of whatever choice you made. If I have a test tomorrow, let's say I'm in college again, that was a long time ago, but if you have a test tomorrow and you choose to go see a movie instead of studying for that test, you're responsible for what happens on the test. Now, a common boundary violation is when you try to blame other people for your own choice. So going back to the movie test thing, let's just say I made that choice and then I failed the test and I say, oh man, I had to go to the movies because my roommate was really depressed and she wanted to hang out with me and we went to see a really funny movie and she felt so much better. You know, I had to get some sleep before the test, so yeah, I failed it, but it really wasn't my fault. Yeah, it was. It was your fault because you made a choice, you know, sorry, and yay for making your friend feel better, but the test suffers. Now, the next one, you're also responsible for your own thoughts. We don't think a certain way just because somebody else thinks that way. When we're young, we do that a lot, though. You know, your best friend when you're 10 likes the color pink, so even though you hate pink, you like pink. You know, those kind of things. Your own thoughts are yours. And another thing, your own thoughts are yours, but you have to communicate those with other people. Sometimes we hold those in and expect people to know what we're thinking, like they should know. Well, they shouldn't. We've been married 28 years and we still don't know what the other person thinks. You have to speak that stuff. Most of the information for boundaries that I'm using tonight is out of this book by Drs. Henry and Cloud, and it's a super book. Been around a long time. That's my old copy. Our dog, when she was a puppy, chewed both ends, so that's why it's all around. But there's a whole series of those. There's like boundaries in dating, boundaries in marriage, boundaries with kids, and they're all super, super books. So I would recommend that you get that. Let's take a few areas where we struggle with our boundaries with ourselves. Does it sound funny to say you have boundaries with yourself? No? Good. So, because you do. Oh boy, the first one I'm going to talk about, and one of the biggest ones, is our struggle with food, eating, choices in eating and food and stuff. Gluttony is the acceptable sin in our culture and in our church environment too. We eat and eat and eat, and we're just great with that a lot of the time. So whether it's eating too much, eating too little, eating the wrong stuff, we have trouble maintaining self-control when it comes to food. Food's a blessing, and it's something that we have to survive. It's not like you can just say, okay, I'm having trouble with food, I'm just not going to do food anymore. You can't do it. But some people try, but it doesn't work so well. So in the times that we live now, food is readily available and it tastes good. It's a social thing, you know, especially with our one generation older than us, in-laws and parents and stuff. You come visit them, they're going to feed you and feed you and feed you, and if your plate gets empty, they're going to bring you more, and they'll be offended if you don't eat it. It's like a social thing. And a lot of the food that we eat now, it's processed, and it has so many additives that are addictive, so we just want to keep eating it. We just want to keep eating it. So last night, we went to, where did we go? Pagliacci's after class. And I was doing good. I had their salad, their Pagliaccio salad, because I love it. But then I had 4 breadsticks. So that was the bad part, you know. I was feeling good about the salad, but those breadsticks just kept going in. So I struggle with that. So I'm going to throw a little idea at you, because a lot of times people will say, why is it so hard to control our eating? So many people have trouble with that. And I don't know, this just came to me one day when I was thinking about all this. And I wonder if it has to do with the fact that the very first sin had to do with food. It had to do with overeating. Because Eve wasn't hungry, I don't think. She wasn't. But she didn't need to eat that fruit. And she was told not to eat that fruit. And what did she do? She ate that fruit. It doesn't matter what that serpent said. She's responsible for her own stuff. So, you know, it just seems like food is that little extra difficult for us. Or maybe it's just because it is for me, and so I think so. But But I don't know if there's a connection or not, but it kind of makes me go, I wonder if God's just got this little, it's like that's his nerve. It's like, oh, food, the first sin was about food. I don't know, and I've got this God list of questions, and that's one of them. Another boundary issue that we have with ourselves involves spending money. We're addicted to stuff. We got stuff, so much stuff. And we spend money whether we have it or not. We're good at that. We live in a culture of immediate gratification. We don't save up and buy a car. We buy a car and then pay for it. Our parents' generation saved up and then bought something. And we're like, no, I want it now. So we just get it. We want what we want right now, no matter what. And in general, people today are wealthier than ever before. We've got luxuries that we take for granted, stuff our grandparents would never dream of having. But are we any happier? No. Are we less stressed? I don't think so. Most people would tell you that they don't have enough money right now to meet what they feel are their needs or desires, and that just a little bit more would solve their problems. But that's true no matter how much they make. And no matter how much more you get with raises or whatever, you still feel like just a little bit more that would solve it. But the problem isn't with the money we make, it's the choices and the self-control with the money ourselves. Another personal boundary has to do with time. And this may step on some people's toes, so scoot your feet back a little bit, but school starts at a certain time. A flight leaves at a certain time. Dinner's at a certain time. Church starts at a certain time. And we live in a culture where everybody's consistently late. And they do it kind of on purpose a lot of the time. It's like, oh no, it starts at 6, but I'm gonna get there before 6:10. It's like we have become this culture of always being late. And I wasn't raised that way. And I don't know if it's somewhat geographical too, or if it's just in general. But I was taught, and I was in performing groups, so it was kind of a different thing. But if you're early, you're on time. If you're on time, you're late. And if you're on time and late, you don't get to participate. So that was drilled into me. And it was drilled into me too that it's just rude to be like that to the people who are there waiting and to the person who's prepared or whatever. So there's not a lot you can do to change an entire culture. But what you can do is just, again, take responsibility for your own actions and be on time. It's just so disrespectful, I think, to do otherwise. So, step on toes, I'm sorry, but that's just something that's one of my pet peeves. So. Our words are another boundary that we have with ourselves, that we have trouble. The words we choose to say deeply affect our relationships with other people. Our words represent what lives in our hearts and in our minds. What comes out of your mouth is what lives inside you. Have you ever caught yourself saying something you thought you would never say? You crossed your own boundary. Or have you shared some information that you knew maybe you shouldn't be sharing? Crossed your boundary. Or did you say something in anger, and as you saw those words come out of your mouth, you said, what am I doing? I see my mother or my uncle or whoever was mean like that, and it's just coming right out. Boundary crossing. So our words are both a blessing and a curse. And in James 3, starting in verse 9, it says, with the tongue we praise our Lord and Father, and with it we curse men who have been made in God's likeness. Out of that same mouth come praise and cursing. My brothers, that should not be so. And it shouldn't be so. So another way our words can cross our boundary is the way we talk to ourselves. When we talk negatively to ourselves about ourselves, that self-talk. You make a mistake and you tell yourself how stupid you are. Or you get frustrated and say, I can never do anything right. We don't hear about a party or something that our friends were invited to and we think, nobody likes me. I'm just useless. So talking to yourself like that crosses a personal boundary of respecting and valuing yourself. And that's a common problem we have too. We also have boundaries not just with ourselves, obviously with other people. And that's kind of what we think about when we say boundaries. You think, okay, somebody's doing something I don't like, I need to set a boundary. So that one's kind of obvious. We're not going to talk a lot about that. So let's look at some examples of boundaries with other people. Things like, I will not allow anyone to physically or verbally abuse me. Can't cross that boundary. I will not listen to gossip. I will not allow illegal drugs in my home. If you throw a fit while we shop for groceries, you'll lose your TV privileges for tonight. That could be for your child or your husband's. If you yell at me or call me names while we're disagreeing, I'll leave the room until you calm down and we can discuss things respectfully. I won't respond to your yelling. If you talk to me in a calm, inside voice, then I'll respond. I will not lie to protect you or me from your poor behavior. Those are boundaries you set between you and another person. I'm not going to violate my moral integrity based on your bad behavior. And then let's talk now about resisting boundaries. Because the easy part is saying, oh yeah, I need to set a boundary here, and saying, this is my boundary. You're feeling all good because you got a boundary. But then somebody else comes up and says, crossing the boundary. So now what do? It would be great if people would just respect a boundary because you set one. But people kind of don't. People kind of don't. They don't like it when you set a boundary and limit their actions towards you. It's working for them to do what they're doing. So there's two areas where you're going to meet resistance. One area is inside yourself. You'll have your own resistance. And another type of resistance is outside of yourself, how other people will resist you. So let's first talk about that external resistance, how other people will react or resist. And the first one is pretty obvious, anger. You set a boundary and they get mad because they don't like it. They may tell you that you're being the bad guy here because you're not letting them do what they want to do. You're being mean and unfair. You're causing all the problems. When they do that, they're shifting the focus from the problem at hand over to you. Okay, and they're trying to take the attention off of them and the bad behavior and put it on you because now you're causing so many arguments with that boundary you set, which is ridiculous anyway. And it's so uncomfortable to face anger from another person, especially someone you care about. And you have to fight the urge to react when they get angry because we want to not deal with anger. But you have to fight that urge to let your fear overcome and make you say, okay, we'll forget it or whatever. Because it's uncomfortable to face a person's anger, but it won't kill you. Okay, you can deal with uncomfortable emotions and be okay. So anger is the first one. The second one is they may throw some guilt messages at you. They may, guilt is very strong and effective when used as a weapon, and especially if you're feeling kind of guilty about setting that boundary in the first place, they may act like that. Boundaries killing them. Like we were talking about earlier, Scripture tells us to put other people above ourselves, think of them as more important, but it doesn't ever tell us that we have to give whatever somebody wants from us. You're in control of, God gave you a mind to figure out, does this make sense, does this not make sense, are they taking advantage of me? And we also have to take responsibility for the impact our choices have on ourselves and others. So here's a little quote from Henry Cloud, one of the authors of Boundaries, and I just really like it. So it says, I think it's on your handout, when we begin to set boundaries with people we love, a really hard thing happens. They hurt. They feel a hole where you used to plug up their aloneness, their disorganization, their financial responsibility, or whatever. Whatever it is, they feel a loss. Now, if you love them, this will be difficult for you to watch. But when you're dealing with someone who's hurting, remember that your boundaries are both necessary for you and helpful for them. If you've been enabling them to be irresponsible, your limit setting may nudge them toward